The message came on a Tuesday morning, though such Earth measurements meant nothing in the vast emptiness of space. Admiral Kevin Marshall stood alone on the observation deck of the Endeavour, humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, watching the stars drift past like scattered diamonds on black velvet. He held a data tablet in his weathered hands. Reading the alien text for perhaps the 20th time since it had arrived, the Galactic Council had found humanity. For 300 years, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. They had sent radio signals into the void, launched probes carrying golden records of their music and languages, and scanned the heavens with increasingly powerful telescopes. The silence had been deafening. Many had given up hope. Others had decided that perhaps being alone was not the worst fate. Then, 18 months ago, everything changed. A probe of clearly artificial origin had entered Earth's solar system, scanned their planets with technology that made human science look like children's toys, and departed without a word. The governments of Earth had panicked, then unified in a way that centuries of diplomacy had failed to achieve. They built the Endeavour in record time, crewed it with their best and brightest, and sent it chasing after the probe's trajectory. Now Kevin understood why the probe had come. It was a scout, a census taker, and the beings who sent it wanted to meet their new neighbors. The door behind him hissed open, and Commander Lisa Grant stepped onto the observation deck. She was a tall woman with sharp features and sharper instincts, the kind of officer who noticed everything and forgot nothing. Kevin had served with her for 15 years, and he trusted her judgment more than his own. "You've read it," she said. It was not a question. Several times, Kevin handed her the tablet. The translation software did its best, but some concepts don't have human equivalents. "What do you make of it?" Lisa scanned the message, her brow furrowing as she processed the alien words. They call themselves the Galactic Council. 17 species, governing what they claim is the entire known galaxy. They've been doing this for 12,000 years. 12,000 years, Kevin repeated. When this council was forming, humans were just figuring out agriculture. We were painting on cave walls and hunting with pointed sticks. "That's probably exactly how they see us," Lisa said. "Look at this part here. They want us to send representatives to somewhere called Dazara Prime. We're supposed to submit to integration protocols, accept our designated tier status, and receive our permitted territorial boundaries." Kevin laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Permitted territorial boundaries. Like they're deciding how much of our own backyard we're allowed to use. It gets better. Lisa scrolled down the message. There's a whole section about tribute requirements. Apparently, new species are expected to contribute resources to the Council for the first 500 years of membership. A kind of entrance fee, I suppose. 500 years of tribute for the privilege of being told where we can and cannot go in our own galaxy. Kevin turned back to the viewport, watching the stars that suddenly seemed less welcoming than before. What happens if we refuse? Lisa was quiet for a moment. The message doesn't say, but the implication is clear enough. No one has ever refused. In 12,000 years of galactic civilization, every species that has encountered the Council has accepted their terms. Every single one. Kevin thought about that. He thought about all of human history, all the times that powerful nations had demanded submission from weaker ones. He thought about the empires that had risen and fallen, the tyrants who had claimed divine right to rule, the countless ordinary people who had been told to know their place and accept their lot in life. He thought about all the times humans had said no. "Get me a secure channel to Earth," he said. "Priority 1. I need to speak with Secretary General Patricia Vance." Lisa nodded and left the observation deck. Kevin remained at the viewport, watching the stars, thinking about what humanity's first words to the galactic community would be. The communication took 4 hours to establish, bouncing through a series of relay stations that stretched across the light years between the Endeavour and Earth. When Patricia Vance's face finally appeared on the screen, Kevin could see the tension in her eyes. She had already been briefed on the alien message. The entire leadership of Earth was waiting to hear his assessment. "Admiral Marshall," Patricia said. I assume you've had time to analyze the Council's communication. I have, Madam Secretary. Kevin chose his next words carefully. In my assessment, we are facing a choice that will define humanity's future among the stars. The Council expects us to follow the path of every other species they've encountered. They expect us to submit, to accept whatever role they've decided we deserve, and to be grateful for the opportunity. Patricia leaned forward. And what do you recommend? Kevin thought about his ancestors. Farmers and soldiers and dreamers who had crossed oceans and continents in search of something better. He thought about every human who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. He thought about the generations yet to come, the children who would inherit whatever future he helped to create. I recommend we show them something they've never seen before, he said. I recommend we show them what humans do when someone tries to tell us who we are and what we're worth. Patricia was silent for a long moment. Behind her, Kevin could see other figures. Advisors and generals and diplomats, all watching. All waiting. You're suggesting we refuse, Patricia said. I'm suggesting we negotiate from a position of self-respect rather than submission. The Council has been doing this for 12,000 years. They have protocols and expectations and a whole system built on the assumption that new species will fall in line. What they don't have is any experience with a species that doesn't. They could destroy us, Patricia said quietly. We have one ship. They have an entire galaxy. Maybe, Kevin admitted, but I don't think they will. Empires that rule through fear alone don't last 12,000 years. There has to be something more to the Council than raw power. And that something is what we need to find. Patricia turned to consult with the figures behind her. Kevin waited, watching the stars, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders. Finally, Patricia turned back to face the screen. You have your orders, Admiral? Proceed to the Sara Prime, but do not, under any circumstances, agree to their terms without explicit authorization from Earth. And Admiral? Yes, Madam Secretary. Whatever happens, make sure they remember us. Kevin allowed himself a small smile. I intend to, Madam Secretary. Endeavor out. The screen went dark, and Kevin was alone again with the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient civilization waited, confident in their power, secure in their assumptions. They had no idea what was coming. Humanity was about to introduce itself. The journey to the Sara Prime took 3 weeks. During that time, the crew of the Endeavor prepared for every possibility they could imagine, and many they probably could not. They studied what little information they had about the Council species, analyzed the probe's technology for any insights into alien psychology, and debated endlessly about what approach might give humanity the best chance of survival. Secretary. General Patricia Vance arrived on the 15th day. Transported by a fast courier ship that had pushed its engines to the breaking point, she brought with her a small team of diplomats and advisors, as well as something that Admiral Kevin Marshall had not expected, a message from the people of Earth. Before we left, Patricia explained, we asked citizens to record their thoughts about first contact. We received over 2 billion responses. Kevin watched the compiled video on the conference room screen. Faces of every color and age, speaking every language, united by a single theme. Hope tempered by determination. A grandmother in Nigeria spoke about wanting peace for her grandchildren. A factory worker in Brazil talked about the sacrifices his family had made to give him a better life, and how he would not see those sacrifices made meaningless by submission to alien overlords. A teenage girl in Japan simply held up a hand-drawn sign that read, "We bow to no one." 2 billion people, Kevin said quietly, all saying the same thing in different ways. More than that, Patricia replied. The responses that didn't make the video were even more emphatic. Admiral, whatever happens on the Sara Prime, we have our mandate. The people of Earth have spoken. The Sara Prime was beautiful in a way that made human words feel inadequate. The planet was a swirl of purple oceans and golden continents, orbited by 3 moons that caught the light of its blue sun and scattered it across the sky like a permanent aurora. The Council had chosen well for their capital. This was a world designed to inspire awe. The Endeavor was directed to a landing platform that floated among the clouds. Connected to the surface by pillars of light that served some purpose, human scientists could not identify. As the ship descended through the atmosphere, Kevin counted at least 100 other vessels of varying sizes and designs. Representing species he could not even begin to classify. "Quite a welcoming committee," Lisa murmured from beside him. "They want to remind us how small we are," Kevin replied. "How many species are at their beck and call? It's theater. Effective theater. Only if we let it be." The council chambers made the landing platform look modest by comparison. Kevin had seen cathedrals and palaces and monuments built to glorify human achievements, but nothing in his experience compared to this. The chamber was carved from a single crystal of impossible size, its walls shifting through colors that seemed to respond to the emotions of those within. 17 massive thrones rose in ascending tiers, each occupied by beings that defied human categories of life. There was the Thessan High Arbiter, a creature made entirely of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. The Velaran ambassador appeared as a collection of shadows that maintained a vaguely humanoid shape through apparent force of will. The Keth representative was a mass of tentacles and eyes that somehow conveyed an impression of ancient wisdom. And these were only the species Kevin could observe directly. Some of the council members existed in states of matter that human senses could barely perceive. In the center of the chamber floor, a single circular platform awaited the human delegation. It was small. It was positioned so that anyone standing on it would have to crane their neck to see the lowest tier of council members. It was, Kevin realized, the place where supplicants were meant to kneel. Patricia walked to the platform and stepped onto it without hesitation. She wore a simple gray suit, carried no ceremonial objects, and showed no sign of the fear that Kevin knew she must be feeling. Behind her, the human delegation arranged themselves in a loose semicircle, facing the council with expressions of polite interest rather than the awe that was clearly expected. The High Arbiter's crystalline voice filled the chamber, resonating through frequencies that human ears could barely process. "You stand before the Galactic Council, representative of the species known as humanity. You have been summoned to receive your place within the cosmic order. You will submit to integration protocols. You will accept your designated tier status. You will receive your permitted territorial boundaries. Kneel and receive our judgment." Chamber fell silent. Every eye and sensor and perception organ in the vast space focused on the small human woman standing alone on the supplicant's platform. Patricia did not kneel. "High Arbiter," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the alien architecture. "Honored members of the Galactic Council, thank you for the invitation to visit your beautiful world. However, I must clarify something important. We did not come here to receive anything." A ripple of confusion passed through the assembly. The Velaran ambassador's shadows churned with agitation. "This is the integration ceremony. All new species undergo integration. This is how it has been done for 12,000 years. "Then perhaps 12,000 years is long enough," Patricia replied. She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a small data chip, which she held up so the council could see. "This contains complete information about Earth, our location, our population, our military capabilities,
our resource distributions.
Everything you would need to threaten us into compliance." She placed the chip on the platform at her feet. "We give this to you freely," Patricia continued. "Not because we are naive, but because we want you to understand something fundamental about humanity. We are not hiding. We are not afraid, and we will not kneel." The chamber erupted. 17 species expressed their outrage in sounds and emanations that crossed the entire spectrum of sensory perception. The Thasian High Arbiter raised a crystalline limb, and the noise subsided into tense silence. "You reject the Council's authority," the High Arbiter stated. It was not a question. "We reject the assumption that authority is something to be granted by those who happen to discover space travel first," Patricia said. "We reject the idea that a species' worth is determined by its age rather than its character. And we reject any arrangement that treats our people as second-class citizens in a galaxy that belongs to all of us equally." The Keth representative spoke for the first time, its voice a wet whisper that somehow filled the chamber. "You understand the consequences of this position. The Council has means of enforcing compliance that you cannot imagine." "I'm sure you do," Patricia agreed. And I'm sure you're very good at using them against species that have already decided to submit. But that's not us. Humanity spent thousands of years fighting each other over land and resources and ideas. We've seen what happens when the strong simply take what they want from the weak. We've also seen what happens when the weak decide they've had enough. She met the High Arbiter's glowing eyes without flinching. You can threaten us. You can probably destroy us. But you cannot make us kneel. That choice is ours, and we have made it. The people of Earth, all 8 billion of them, have spoken with one voice. We will meet you as equals, or we will not meet you at all. Patricia turned and walked off the platform, her footsteps echoing through the stunned silence. The human delegation followed, none of them looking back. Behind them, 17 ancient species sat in their towering thrones and wondered, perhaps for the first time in millennia, what would happen next? The Endeavor returned to Earth carrying news that divided humanity between pride and terror. Patricia Vance had spoken for them all, had refused to bow before powers beyond imagination, had told the masters of the galaxy that humans would not be ruled. It was the stuff of legends. It was also, many feared, a death sentence. 3 months passed. During that time, Earth prepared as best it could. Factories that had produced consumer goods now churned out military hardware. Scientists who had studied theoretical physics now worked frantically to reverse engineer the alien probe's technology. Politicians who had spent decades arguing with each other now cooperated with an urgency, born of existential threat. Admiral Kevin Marshall oversaw the construction of Earth's first true space fleet. It was a pitiful thing by galactic standards. 73 vessels built in desperate haste, crewed by men and women who had never seen combat in space. But it was something. It was proof that humanity would not simply wait to be conquered. On the morning of the 92nd day after Patricia's declaration, long-range sensors detected the first wave of alien ships entering the solar system. Kevin was on the bridge of the Endeavor when the report came in. Commander Lisa Grant read the numbers in a voice carefully stripped of emotion. 400 vessels, Admiral. Multiple species configurations. They're arranging themselves in standard engagement formation at the edge of the system. 400. Kevin closed his eyes for a moment, doing the math he had already done 100 times. 73 against 400. Even assuming equal technology, which they certainly did not have, those odds were impossible. They're broadcasting, Lisa reported. Standard frequency, universal translator protocols. They want us to hear this. Put it through. The view screen flickered to life, showing a Thesan military commander. Unlike the High Arbiter's soft glow, this being's crystal form pulsed with hard, aggressive light. I am Fleet Commander, Araxis of the Council Dominion Fleet. Your species has been granted one final opportunity to accept integration protocols. Surrender now, and only your leadership will face consequences for their defiance. Resist, and your entire civilization will be dismantled. You have 1 standard hour to respond. The transmission ended. Kevin looked around the bridge at his crew, saw the fear they were trying to hide, the determination they were trying to maintain. These were good people. They deserved better than a hopeless last stand. Open a channel to all Earth vessels, he ordered, and patch me through to the Secretary General. Patricia Vance's face appeared on a secondary screen, alongside the faces of a dozen other world leaders who had gathered in the emergency command center beneath. The Swiss Alps. Kevin could see the weight of the moment pressing down on all of them. Patricia said, "We're receiving their transmission here as well. What's your assessment?" "Honestly, Madam Secretary, if we fight them with what we have now, we lose. Not close, not heroic. We simply lose." "Then perhaps we should reconsider, however," Kevin interrupted. "I said if we fight them with what we have now. The situation has changed somewhat since we left this Ara Prime." Patricia frowned. "Changed how?" Kevin allowed himself a small smile. "You remember when I said we needed to find out what the Council really was? What kept them together for 12,000 years? Well, while you were handling the diplomatic side of things, my people were doing some digging. It turns out the Council is not as unified as they want everyone to believe." He nodded to Lisa, who pulled up a tactical display on the main view screen. Over the past 3 months, we've been contacted by representatives of 37 species, not council members. Lower-tier species like us, planets that had accepted integration protocols because they saw no alternative. They've been watching humanity with great interest. The tactical display changed, showing not just Earth's 73 vessels, but new signatures appearing throughout the solar system. Ships emerging from concealment, from behind moons and asteroids, from the shadows of gas giants where they had been hiding and waiting. They wanted to see if we were serious, Kevin continued. If humanity would really stand up to the council, or if we would fold at the first sign of pressure. When we didn't fold, they decided to take a chance. CE, the number of friendly vessels on the display kept climbing. 500. 1,000. 2,000? How many? Patricia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Currently, 7,412 vessels from 37 species are positioned throughout the solar system, ready to stand with humanity against the Dominion fleet. The command center erupted in shocked exclamations. Kevin waited for the noise to subside before continuing. It seems we're not the only ones who were tired of kneeling, Madam Secretary. We were just the first ones crazy enough to say it out loud. On the main view screen, the Dominion fleet's 400 ships suddenly looked much smaller. Open a channel to Fleet Commander Araxis, Kevin ordered. Let's see how he likes the new odds. The Thesan commander's image reappeared, radiating the same aggressive confidence as before. Admiral Marshall, I assume you are calling to announce your surrender. Not quite, Commander. Kevin leaned forward in his chair. I'm calling to inform you that the situation has changed. Please direct your sensors to the following coordinates. He transmitted the locations of the hidden fleet. For a long moment, Araxis said nothing. Then the crystalline being's form flickered with colors that Kevin's translator interpreted as shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. This is impossible. The lower-tier species would never dare, and yet here they are, Kevin interrupted. 7,000 ships, Commander. 37 species. All of them tired of being told what they are and are not allowed to do. All of them ready to fight for the right to be treated as equals. Araxis's form pulsed erratically. You cannot win this battle. Even with these numbers, Council technology is far superior, maybe. But here's the thing about fighting for freedom, Commander. It's not just about winning. It's about making the cost of oppression higher than the benefits. You might destroy us today, but you'll lose ships. You'll lose crew. You'll lose the illusion that the Council's authority is unquestionable. And then you'll have to deal with the next species that decides to follow our example. Kevin stood up from his command chair, facing the view screen directly. So here's my counteroffer. Turn your fleet around. Go back to the Sara Prime. Tell the Council that the galaxy is changing, and they can either change with it or be left behind. Because one way or another, the days of automatic submission are over. The channel went silent. Kevin watched the tactical display tracking the positions of both fleets, wondering if he had just saved humanity or doomed it. 30 minutes later, the Dominion fleet began to withdraw. The withdrawal of the Dominion fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For 12,000 years, the Council had maintained order. Through a combination of overwhelming force and the simple assumption that no one would dare resist. Now that assumption lay shattered. It's broken by a species that had been traveling among the stars for less than 50 years, on the Sara Prime. The 17 elder species convened an emergency session. Debates raged through the crystalline chambers, arguments that would have been unthinkable mere months before. Some demanded immediate retaliation, the complete destruction of humanity and all species that had dared to stand with them. Others counseled patience, pointing out that such action would only prove the rebels' point and inspire further resistance. A few, speaking carefully from the back of the chamber, suggested that perhaps the time had come to reconsider the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. Meanwhile, in Earth's solar system, a celebration was underway. The 7,000 ships that had gathered to defend humanity remained in place. Their crews meeting and mingling through holographic communication links, sharing stories and songs and dreams of a future different from anything they had known before? Admiral. Kevin Marshall found himself hosting delegations from a dozen different species aboard the Endeavor. His ship, designed for human proportions, had become a symbol of the new movement, and everyone wanted to see it for themselves. The Vorn were perhaps the most surprising visitors. Their species had been part of the Council system for 8,000 years, longer than some of the elder species themselves. They appeared as tall, slender beings with skin that shifted colors according to their emotional state, and they moved with a grace that made humans feel clumsy by comparison. Ambassador Telax, the Vorn representative, stood in the Endeavor's observation lounge. Watching Earth rotate slowly in the viewport below, Kevin stood beside him, still struggling to process everything that had happened. "You do not understand what you have done," Telax said. His skin rippled through shades of blue that Kevin's translator interpreted as profound wonder. "In 8,000 years, we never imagined this was possible. We accepted our place in the hierarchy because we believed there was no alternative." "There's always an alternative," Kevin replied. "Sometimes it just takes someone stubborn enough to look for it." Stubborn. Telex's colors shifted to something warmer. "Yes, this is a very human quality, is it not? Your species is young, but you do not seem to know it. You look at the galaxy and see not what is, but what could be. Is that such a bad thing? It is a dangerous thing. Dangerous to you? Certainly. But also dangerous to those of us who had forgotten how to hope." The door to the observation lounge opened, and Secretary General Patricia Vance entered, accompanied by Lisa Grant and several other senior officers. They had all been running on minimal sleep since the standoff ended, coordinating the unprecedented alliance that had formed almost overnight. "Admiral," Patricia said, "we've received a communication from the Zara Prime. The Council wants to talk." Kevin felt a spike of tension in his chest. What kind of talk? They're not entirely clear on that. Patricia handed him a data tablet containing the translated message. "But they've specifically requested that I return to the Council chambers. And they've asked that representatives from the allied species come as well." Telax's skin flashed bright yellow, a color Kevin's translator could not interpret. "They want to negotiate. The Council has never negotiated with lower-tier species. Never in 12,000 years, and I suppose we're making history," Patricia said. She looked at Kevin. "What do you think, Admiral? Is this a trap?" Kevin considered the question carefully. "Possibly, but I don't think so. The Council is old, but they're not stupid. They've seen what happened when they tried to use force. Now they're trying something different. Or they're buying time to gather a larger fleet. But we'll never know unless we go." Kevin turned to Telax. "Ambassador, would the Vorn be willing to participate in these talks?" Telex's colors shifted through a complex pattern that suggested deep internal debate. Finally, they settled on a determined shade of green. "Yes, we have been silent for 8,000 years. It is time we found our voice again." The journey back to the Zara Prime was very different from the first time. Instead of a single human vessel approaching in isolation, a fleet of nearly 500 ships made the trip together. Each ship represented a species that had stood with humanity against the Dominion fleet, and each one carried delegates who had never before been invited to speak in the Council chambers. When they arrived at the capital world, they found changes already underway. The floating platform where the Endeavor had first landed was now surrounded by dozens of similar platforms, each large enough to accommodate the diverse vessels of the Allied fleet. The pillars of light that connected them to the surface had multiplied, forming a network that spoke of rapid, almost desperate construction. They're preparing for something. Lisa observed as the Endeavor descended through the atmosphere. "Look at all this new infrastructure. This didn't exist 3 months ago." "They're adapting," Kevin agreed. "The question is, adapting to what?" The answer became clear when the Allied delegation entered the Council chambers. The towering thrones of the 17 elder species remained, but they had been rearranged, where before they had risen in ascending tiers. Emphasizing the hierarchy of power, now they were positioned in a curve that faced a much larger floor space. And in that floor space, hundreds of seats had been arranged in concentric circles, each one designed to accommodate the different physical forms of the allied species. High Arbiter, stood at the center of the chamber. The crystalline being's form glowing with colors that Kevin had never seen before. When the Arbiter spoke, the ancient voice carried a tone that was almost uncertain. "Welcome, representatives of the Alliance of Free Species." Essex paused as if the words were difficult to form. "The Council has deliberated. We find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. For 12,000 years, we have maintained order through the integration system. We believed this system was just and necessary. We believed it protected all species, including those in the lower tiers." The Arbiter's form flickered. "We were wrong." A murmur passed through the assembled delegates, both council members and Alliance representatives alike. Kevin glanced at Patricia, saw the same surprise reflected in her eyes. "The arrival of humanity has forced us to confront truths we have long avoided," Essex continued. "The lower-tier species were not content with their place. They accepted it because they saw no alternative. When humanity showed them an alternative, they seized it with a desperation we did not anticipate." The Arbiter turned to face the human delegation D. "Directly Secretary General Vance, Admiral Marshall, your species has accomplished something remarkable. You have reminded the galaxy that the strong do not have an inherent right to rule the weak. You have shown that courage can be more powerful than technology. And you have united species that had never before dared to imagine a different future." The Essex's glow intensified. "We do not yet know what that future will look like. But we know it cannot be built on the old foundations. The Council must change, or it will become irrelevant. And so we ask you, representatives of humanity, what do you propose?" Every eye in the chamber turned to Patricia Vance. She stood for a moment, processing the weight of what had just happened. Then she stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "We propose equality, not granted by the powerful to the weak, but recognized as the fundamental right of every species that has ever looked up at the stars and wondered. We propose a new council where every voice matters, where decisions are made together, where the age of a civilization matters less than the quality of its ideas." She paused, looking around the chamber at beings so alien that human minds could barely comprehend them, yet so familiar in their hopes and fears. "We propose that 12,000 years of hierarchy end today, and that tomorrow we begin building something better. Together." The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, one by one, the allied delegates began to signal their approval. Colors flashed, sounds resonated, energies pulsed through frequencies beyond human perception. And finally, hesitantly, some of the council members joined in. It was not unanimous. It was not even close to unanimous. But it was a beginning. 5 years passed. They were not easy years. Change never comes without resistance. And there were many in the old council system who fought against the transformation with every tool at their disposal. 3 of the 17 elder species withdrew entirely, retreating to their home territories and refusing to participate in what they called the destruction of galactic civilization. Conflicts erupted along border regions as old power structures collapsed and new ones struggled to take their place. But humanity, with its allies, persevered. The new Galactic Assembly met for the first time on the anniversary of Patricia Vance's original declaration. The chamber on the Sarah Prime had been completely redesigned. Gone were the towering thrones and ascending tiers. In their place, a vast circular table stretched across the floor, large enough to accommodate representatives from 87 member species. There was no head of the table, no position of prominence. Every seat was equal. Admiral Kevin Marshall, now retired from active service, attended the ceremony as a guest of honor. He sat in a gallery above the assembly floor, watching the representatives take their places with a mixture of pride and wonder. Beside him sat Ambassador Tellax of the Vorn, whose skin had never quite returned to its original colors since the day of the standoff. "When you first arrived in this system," Tellax said quietly, "I wondered if your species was brave or simply foolish. I think now that perhaps there is no difference." Kevin laughed. "That sounds about right. We've never been very good at knowing when to quit. And I suspect that is why you succeeded where 8,000 years of Vorn acceptance failed." Telex's colors shifted to a warm gold. We knew the system was wrong. We felt it in everything the Council demanded of us. But we could not imagine an alternative. You could. Below, the assembly was coming to order. High Arbiter Thesix, who had chosen to remain as a senior advisor to the new organization, called for silence. The crystalline being's form had changed over the years, becoming somehow softer, more approachable. Kevin sometimes wondered if the Thesan had changed physically, or if he had simply learned to see them differently. Honored representatives, Thesix began. We gathered today to mark the 5th anniversary of the Galactic Assembly. 5 years ago, we faced a choice: cling to the old ways, or embrace an uncertain future. We chose the future. We chose hope. The Arbiter's glow pulsed through the chamber. It has not been easy. We have lost species who could not accept the new order. We have faced conflicts and crises that tested our commitment to equality, but we have endured. And more than endured, we have grown. A holographic display materialized above the assembly floor, showing statistics and achievements from the past 5 years. Trade between former lower-tier species had increased by 300%. Joint scientific initiatives had produced technological advances that benefited all member worlds. Cultural exchanges had created connections between species that had never before communicated directly. None of this would have been possible, Thesix continued, without the courage of those who refused to accept things as they were. And so it is my honor to introduce the person who started it all. Secretary General Patricia Vance of Earth. Patricia rose from her seat at the assembly table and walked to the center of the floor. At 62, her hair had gone fully silver, and the years of constant work had left their mark on her face. But her eyes were as sharp as ever, and her voice carried the same calm authority that had faced down the Council all those years ago. Thank you, Arbiter Thesix, and thank you to all the representatives gathered here today. Patricia looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and sensors and perception organs of dozens of species. 5 years ago, I stood in this chamber and said that humanity would not kneel. I stand before you today to say something different. She paused, letting the silence build. We will not kneel, but we will bow in respect and gratitude to our partners in this great experiment. Not because anyone demands it of us, but because you have earned it. You took a chance on a young, stubborn species that had no business challenging the established order. You stood with us when the easier path would have been to look away. You helped us build something new. Patricia's voice softened. I will not pretend that what we have created is perfect. We still have disagreements. We still have conflicts. We still have species who look at each other with suspicion rather than trust. But we also have something we did not have before: hope. Real hope for a future where every species can reach its potential, where no one has to accept being less than they could be. She reached into her pocket and produced a small object, a simple stone from Earth, polished smooth by millions of years of water flowing over it. We have a saying: a single pebble can start an avalanche. I would like to present this pebble to the Galactic Assembly as a reminder of where we began and how far we have come. She placed the stone on a small pedestal in the center of the floor, where it would remain as a permanent symbol of the transformation. Thank you all for believing, for hoping, for standing together. The assembly erupted in applause, each species expressing appreciation in its own unique way. Kevin watched from the gallery, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Telex noticed and tilted his head in curiosity. You are experiencing strong emotions, Admiral. Yes. Kevin wiped at his eyes without embarrassment. When we set out from Earth, I thought we might not survive. I thought we might start a war that would destroy everything humanity had built. Instead, we started something far bigger than any of us imagined. Do you regret any of it? Kevin thought about the question carefully. He thought about the friends he had lost in the conflicts of the past 5 years, close calls and narrow escapes, the moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. He thought about the cost of change, the price of freedom, the weight of being the species that refused to kneel. No, he said finally, not for a second. Below, the assembly continued its work, debating and discussing and deciding the future of the galaxy. It was messy and complicated and often frustrating, but it was theirs, all of them together, built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than enforced submission. On a small human colony world at the edge of explored space, a teacher named Mary Collins gathered her students for their daily lesson. The children, ranging in age from 6 to 12, represented for different species. Humans, Vorn, a young Thesan, and two members of a species so new to the assembly that they did not yet have a common name. Today, Mary said, we're going to learn about how the Galactic Assembly was created. Does anyone know where this story begins? A small human girl raised her hand. With the humans who wouldn't kneel? Mary smiled. That's right. It all started when a few stubborn humans decided that they deserved a seat at the table, even though no one thought they could earn one. And do you know what happened? The children shook their heads, even though they had heard this story a dozen times before. They changed the galaxy. Not by being the strongest or the oldest or the most advanced, but by being brave enough to imagine something different, and determined enough to make it real. Mary looked at her students, at the faces of species that would have been enemies in the old system, now learning side by side as friends. And that, she said, is what any of you can do too. Never let anyone tell you that you cannot change the world, because sometimes that is exactly what the world needs. Outside the classroom window, stars filled the sky. Each one was a sun, perhaps with worlds of its own, perhaps with species that had yet to be discovered. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, but it was no longer divided between masters and servants, elders and furs. It belonged to